In this lesson, I want to talk about the tune 26-2 by John Coltrane. This is one of those tunes that he wrote where he took the changes that he came up with for giant steps, and he just took those changes and applied them to already existing tunes, such as this one. This is a reharmonization, basically, of Charlie Parker's tune Confirmation. So the most famous example, I think, is Countdown. I might do a lesson in the future about Countdown. I'm just going to learn how to play over it first. But there he took the so-called Coltrane changes and just applied it to the tune Tune Up. So this is a little bit of an advanced lesson. I'm kind of assuming that you have worked on giant steps, and this is kind of the next level. Now you need more, and you want to know. You're thinking, how can I kind of apply this to my playing? So I'm gonna talk a little bit about that, and I'm gonna talk about how to play over the tune, and give you some tricks and ideas on how you can solo this tune. Also gonna talk a little bit about this this book at the end of the video. I'm not gonna go over it in detail. I'm just gonna give you a quick overview of what this is. In this book, you can find a whole bunch of those tunes that he came up with during this time where he was kind of experimenting with his giant steps cycle, or whatever you want to call it. So what is the giant step cycle? Well, it's 3 tonics. The tune giant steps consist of 3 tonics: B, G, and E flat. And the way he gets to the next chord is by its dominant. So dominant to G, dominant to E flat. So there's like this cycle. It's a feeling of movement. Instead of 1 tonic, we have 3 tonics, which gives you kind of an ambiguous sound. So he was kind of experimenting with these chords, and what he did, he applied it to other tunes. So let's take a look at the original changes of Confirmation by Charlie Parker. So those are the first 4 bars there, right? And what we have in 26-2 is this. Some of the chords are the same. Then he's just kind of superimposing his cycle on top of the existing changes. So how do we solo over this? One of the tips in this book, Countdown to Giant Steps, is that you can, instead of trying to swallow the whole thing at once, divide the tune into different smaller sections and just kind of loop them so that you get used to, let's say, the first four bars. So here I have a loop pedal and I have looped the first 4 bars. Then maybe just try to do chord tones, the normal stuff you would normally do, right? And something else that I have talked about lots of times before, so I'm not going to go over it in detail again, but the so-called John Coltrane pattern chord tones. So instead of playing just the chord tones, you play 1, 2, 3, 5. I'm not going to go over it again because I've explained this many times before. So that would sound like this, right? So you want to be able to kind of manipulate those patterns, play them, different directions, break them up, omitting notes, adding rhythm. So again, I've talked about this many times before. So if you thought that was very weird, you should watch my previous videos, and I'll link to those in the description below. And also, I have the tune, the head of the tune, written out as a PDF, and you can find that, as always, on my Patreon page. Just want to real quick mention that I'm actually really close to reaching my goal on Patreon. So again, thank you so much to you who support me on Patreon. I never thought I would reach that goal, actually. It's been, I think, a little over a year. I might be wrong about that, but so yeah, thank you so much. And I try to release videos every other week, bi-weekly. So on Fridays, every other Friday I release a new video, because I work full-time as a teacher, so I don't really have time to make a video a week. And also, I think for those of you who follow me, there's a lot to digest in my videos. So I think bi-weekly is enough for now. So if you have any comments about that, please let me know. Okay, so now we have the chord tones. That's all good. But we kind of need more, right? To be able to play over this tune. It's not enough to just play chord tones if you expect to kind of be able to blow over this tune in the style of Chris Potter or something. Obviously, you need a whole lot more. So a couple of other things you can do. You can take the melody of the tune and look at it. It has little fragments that you can use. Already, right off the bat, we have a little idea that we can develop and continue this idea over the next set of chords. So we'll listen to that over the changes. Okay, that's a kind of a cool idea. Then the next 4 bars. That's another idea you can use. Right? And I can use that, transpose it back to the first 4 bars. So what happens there is it forces you to kind of think, wait, what's the first note? What is the third? Right? The fifth. There's something you notice here is first phrase. It's an E flat minor triad. Same thing with. So that kind of goes to show that maybe he's thinking of that chord, the second chord, the A flat, as an E flat minor. That might seem weird, but it's not that weird. You can replace the dominant chord with its 2 chord. So the A flat is a dominant of the D flat major 7, right? E flat minor is the 2 chord. And if you think of a 2, 5, 1 to D flat major, you have E flat minor to A flat 7 to D flat major 7. You can ignore the 2 chord, right? But you can also ignore the 5 chord. This is not super weird. What happens when you do that is that the bass line is easier for kind of the brain to compute. So instead of F, A flat, D flat, E, A, C, you get F, E flat, D flat, B, where are we? A, G. So it goes down whole steps. And this is a very common technique to use over giant steps. I think I've mentioned it before when I've talked about giant steps. It's easier to think like that. Now, if we go back and do the Coltrane pattern chord tones, but instead of treating the dominant chord as dominant chords, we're gonna treat them as its 2 chord. So let's see what that sounds like. I mean, it sounds fine. That I did again, I reversed them and I anticipated. One nice thing you can do is reverse them or alternate. Right? So all of a sudden you have more ideas. Remember, we only had one idea just a second ago. Now we have a little bit more to work with. One more thing I want to talk about that I haven't talked about before, and that is taking the Coltrane pattern, the Coltrane 4-note pattern, and play its inversions. Right? So the first inversion would be this, right? So here's the root position, or root inversion, or whatever you, not root position, I don't know what to call it. First inversion would be starting on the 9th or the 2nd, and then starting on the 3rd, starting on the 5th. That, by the way, is How High the Moon. Just a side note. If I, for example, take the first inversion and play over the first 4 bars, I get this. Right? Second inversion. I like to do that descending. It's a great sound. And again, it's editing. This is a good idea to work on this. Take the section of the tune and try the different inversions, because that opens up a whole new world of possibilities. And then of course you want to do the next section of the tune, obviously, and then ultimately you want to work on the whole tune. I'm just kind of moving fast here because I don't want to make a 3-hour video. Now, here is something that happens, and this, now I want you to pay attention, because this is like the most important thing I'm going to tell you, I think. When you work on this the way I showed you right now. One thing I'm pretty sure is going to happen, that happens to me anyway, and that is that I notice, for example, that I always do the same thing when I work. I play a certain arpeggio, and then I go to the next place and in the same manner all the time. The guitar fretboard opens up endless possibilities, but we tend to kind of do the same thing over and over. And when that happens, you want to just be aware of that happens. Don't get frustrated, because it's not super bad that's not the end of the world that happens, because at least you're playing something, right? And when you listen to even John Coltrane play these tunes himself, he tends to play the same thing many times, especially on Countdown. He'll play the same exact pattern every time. So having so-called pet phrases is not necessarily a bad idea. Just notice that, every time there's a D flat, I go here, for example, let's say. So don't worry too much about it. But then when you get a little bit more comfortable, you might want to do this. Slow down the backing track and tell yourself, I'm not going to play there. Every time there's a D flat, I play it here. So now I'm not allowed to play it there. Find another way to play it. Another place, another fingering, anything. So that means you're breaking out of habits. So having habits is not necessarily bad, but it's also good to practice in a way where you break habits. So now, just as an experiment, what happens if I play these things that I've just covered over the original changes of confirmation? So how much is it gonna clash? Well, let me just try to do it and we'll see what it sounds like, okay? Okay, so that wasn't the greatest demonstration, but you get the idea. It sounds kind of weird, but it's not super weird. I totally hear people do that. I heard the other day, I was listening to Stan Getz, and he's pretty straight ahead, right? And he was superimposing these changes over other tunes, so it's not super uncommon. Now let's just talk a little bit about this book. So this is a countdown to giant steps. What he means by that, I guess, is that there are a couple of ways in which he shows you preparing exercises for the challenging tune. So, for example, you can take a section of the tune, you can slow it down, and there are play-alongs with these different what do you call them, segments of giant steps, elements of giant steps, and so on. He takes the 2/5 and focuses on that. And by the way, somebody was asking me when I'm flipping through the pages that they can't see. Obviously, when I make videos, I'm not giving you the content of the book. I didn't make this book, right? I'm just telling you which books that I like and that I think is a good idea to have. These are one of the books that I used a lot when I try to learn how to do all this. So my videos are not about going over a whole book, because I don't want to take credit for what someone else did, right? And plus, there's obviously a copyright infringement, right? So I'm just kind of telling you what this book is about, and if you find it interesting, I really recommend that you get this book. So then there are tunes that they wrote specifically for this book, which are, I think, written by Andy Laverne, who's a great musician. And then there are some of those famous reharmonizations that he wrote during this era. For example, Countdown, Central Park West, and Central Park West is another original tune. Body and Soul, there's a very famous reharm of Body and Soul by John Coltrane. So Aebersold's, right? Definitely the most famous jazz improvisational teaching books out there. A little bit outdated these days because it comes with CDs and stuff like that. But I remember when I started trying to learn this stuff, like if you get your hands on an Aebersold, any Aebersold, you really worked using that book, right? And then I started jazz college program much later on, and my roommate gave me a USB stick he's like, oh, Aebersolds, I have all of them here. All of them, on one, I think it was a USB, or maybe it's back in the day when you used burned DVDs. And I remember, like, that's crazy, right? Like, you can get all of them for free, and just like that. Just imagine the amount of work going into creating these books. The players that play on these play-alongs are amazing, some of the best players in the world. So I definitely feel that you should purchase a book. If you want to work on this, don't just find it online if you're good at that, and get the book. And again, if I were Aebersold, I would recommend that you would make like an online version for the backing tracks. But I guess it has to do with publishing issues, or how many books there's still out there in print and whatever. So one of the problems there when I was playing along with this backing track is that the backing tracks is not responding to when I'm playing these changes. It just ignores what I'm doing, obviously, and it's just, if you were playing with real musicians, they might pick up on, oh, he's playing the Coltrane chords there, and they might respond. I play with the piano player sometimes that definitely do that. If you play something like that, he will instantly notice, and he thinks it's kind of fun. So he will kind of throw in those chords and maybe start playing them as well in his solo. So that kind of to talk a little bit about why are we working on this stuff? Like, why are we trying to play these tunes? I have a couple of different responses to that question. One is, well, Coltrane did it. So if he did it, we should do it. Because as a jazz musician, you should have a kind of an exploring mind. You should be trying to constantly expand on your understanding of harmony. And I think that's why John Coltrane came up with these chords, because he was searching for something. He wasn't satisfied with just playing diatonic keys. He wanted something more, which that's why he's one of the great geniuses of of music, because it's kind of easy for us to take what he did and just work with it, but he had to imagine this and invent this whole thing, right? So it's part of the jazz canon these days. If you want to understand why players play like they do today, it's a good idea to understand why they played like they did in the past. And this is what was one era. And so imagine if you're an artist, as in a painter, for example, and you want to paint. I'm assuming that somebody who's a professional painter today can kind of emulate, let's say, Impressionism or other styles of Picasso or something. But they're not going to paint like Picasso. But you should have at least some kind of, at least I'm assuming that's how that works. In order to paint contemporary art, you have to have an understanding of older art. Same thing here. You're not going to play like John Coltrane, but you want to learn what he did and make it part of your own playing. So there is this evolution through jazz, right? First you had traditional jazz, and then you had Charlie Parker taking those tunes and applying his ideas on top of it, and then you had bebop. And then you had John Coltrane, who took it even further, and now you have all the players today who have taken it even much further. So there's this natural evolution that you want to have an understanding of. So studying this stuff, it's not like you're going to learn how to do this and then you're going to go to the next jam or gig and just start playing Coltrane changes over everything. That's not how that works, but you want to make it part of your own understanding of harmony and jazz and music and all the rest of it. I'm not sure if I explained this in the best way, but that's my take on all that. So with that, I hope this lesson wasn't too long and too confusing. As always, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you want PDFs, you can go to my Patreon page, or you can contact me through here if you want just get this PDF, right, specifically. And yeah, I shall see you next time.